Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I've been around WWE for years. Seen things most people wouldn't believe. Broken bones, shattered egos, fights that spilled out of the ring and into real life. But nothing prepared me for what happened that night in New Orleans. The arena itself was a relic, a crumbling, half-forgotten building that had been hosting wrestling events for decades. The kind of place where the air always smelled faintly of sweat, stale beer, and something else, something old, something damp like a basement that had never fully dried out. Some of the wrestlers joked about the place being haunted, said they heard things when the hallways were empty, saw movement where there shouldn't have been any. But wrestlers love to tell stories, and I'd heard all before. Every arena had its ghost stories. This was different. The show had wrapped up, and most of the crew had already cleared out. I was in the locker room alone, finishing some paperwork. The overhead lights flickered every now and then, but that was normal. Old wiring, old building. The only sound was the distant clatter of someone stacking chairs in the arena, the occasional echo of laughter from the few stragglers still hanging around. Nothing out of the ordinary, until I saw it. At first, it was just a flicker of movement in the mirror across the room. Quick, just at the edge of my vision. I turned my head fast, too fast, but there was nothing there. Just the empty row of lockers, my own reflection staring back at me. But something was off. My reflection wasn't quite right. I wasn't standing perfectly still, but my reflection was. For a second, just a second, it didn't move the way I did. A chill ran down my spine. I turned away from the mirror, suddenly feeling uneasy. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But when I glanced back, there was someone standing behind me. Not a person. Not exactly. A shape. A figure. Tall. Too tall. Its form was stretched, warped, like a shadow cast by a body that wasn't really there. It didn't have a face, not that I could see, just darkness. Deep, crawling darkness, like something that had slithered in from another place, another world. I spun around, so fast my chair nearly tipped over. The room was empty. My breath came hard and fast. My skin was clammy. Every instinct in my body screamed run, but my legs didn't want to work. I grabbed my phone and flicked on the flashlight, sweeping it across the room. The beam caught the lockers, the benches, the old tiled floor. Nothing. No one. I let out a nervous laugh, shaking my head. Jesus. I needed sleep. Maybe a drink. Maybe both. Then, bam, the locker room door slammed shut. Hard. So hard the walls shook. I jumped back, my pulse hammering. My throat was dry. No way. No way in hell. I was across the room in seconds, grabbing the handle, twisting hard. Locked. It wouldn't budge. And then, the whisper. Soft. Right against my ear. Get out. I don't remember opening the door. I don't remember running. All I know is that 1 second I was in that room, and the next I was halfway down the hallway, my chest heaving, my skin crawling. I didn't go back in. Someone else grabbed my stuff for me. The next day I tried to shake it off. Told myself it was just exhaustion, just my mind playing tricks. But then one of the crew members, an older guy who'd been with WWE for years, pulled me aside. "You saw it, didn't you?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. He nodded like he already knew. "You're not the first." I wanted to ask him what he meant. I wanted to know more. But a part of me didn't. A part of me was afraid of the answer. That was the last time I ever stayed late in that arena. I never saw the shadow again. But sometimes, late at night, when I think back to that moment, I wonder if it saw me. Story 2. You ever hear a song that makes your skin crawl? Not because of the lyrics, not because it reminds you of something dark in your past, but because there's something wrong with it, something beneath the notes, behind the melody, whispering where no voice should be. I never used to believe in that sort of thing. Music is just sound, right? Waves in the air, manipulated by strings, keys, or some guy in a booth twisting knobs. But I learned the hard way that some songs, just a few, are something else, something evil. This was back in the mid-2000s, during one of WWE's smaller events. A dark match. You know, one of those pre-show throwaway bouts for an up-and-coming talent. Someone trying to impress the higher-ups. They usually bring their own theme music at this stage, something cobbled together from a garage band or a freelancer online. Nothing special, except this one. The guy's name was Jack Malone, a big indie name, had a real presence about him, like he already belonged under the bright lights. WWE had their eye on him, and this was supposed to be his big moment. I remember sitting at the production desk when his theme music hit. At first, I thought the speakers were broken. It was this slow, dragging sound, like a funeral dirge played backwards. Strings groaned under impossible tension. A choir, not of voices, but of something else, something hollow, rose behind the beat, moaning instead of singing. The hairs on my arm stood up, and I wasn't the only one who noticed. The entire arena shifted, not physically, but in feeling, like the temperature had dropped, like the space between the seats had stretched just a little too far. I saw crew members glancing around, rubbing their arms. One of the cameramen later swore the feed had momentarily glitched, showing static and someone, standing in the entrance tunnel where there was no one at all. Then the lights flickered. Now, this happens sometimes at shows, power surges, faulty wiring. But this was different. Every single light, from the overhead rigging to the little LEDs on our monitors, pulsed like a heartbeat. The Titantron screen blurred, distorting into shapes I couldn't quite focus on. And for a moment, just a brief, impossible moment, the entire arena felt empty. I don't mean the crowd went quiet. I mean it felt like the people were gone. Like we weren't in a stadium anymore, but in something bigger, darker, stretching on forever. Then just as suddenly, it snapped back to normal. Jack walked down the ramp, seemingly unfazed, and the match went on. No one said anything. We were professionals. We had a job to do, but there was an unspoken agreement between all of us. Something was wrong. After the show, I found myself backstage, still shaken. That's when I heard the commotion. A couple of refs and trainers rushed past me, heading to the locker room. I followed out of instinct. When I got there, I saw Jack Malone on the floor, unconscious. At first, they thought he'd passed out from exhaustion, maybe dehydration. But when they rolled him over, everyone went still. There were marks on his back, deep, jagged scratches, running from his shoulder blades down to his waist. Not like he'd fallen on something sharp, not like ring rope burns. No, these were deliberate, like claw marks, Something had raked its fingers down his skin. Jack came to a few minutes later, but he wouldn't talk about what happened. His eyes darted around the room, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. His hand shook as he grabbed his bag and left without even changing out his gear. That night, something even stranger happened. His theme song was gone, not just from the event's archives, but from every WWE system. The production team swore they hadn't deleted it. The sound guy who played it, he said it was still on his laptop when he left the arena, but the next morning, the file was corrupted, unplayable. Even weirder, no one could find Jack Malone. He never came back. No calls, no emails. His contract was never finalized. His social media went dark. Even his old indie contacts had no idea where he was. It was like he had disappeared completely. But here's the part that keeps me up at night. A few weeks later, one of the audio engineers who had been messing around, trying to recover that theme song, sent me a text. Just one sentence. I heard something in the track. I called him immediately, but he wouldn't say more. Just that he was done. Done with WWE. Done with music. He quit the next day. I don't know what he heard. I don't want to know. But sometimes, late at night, I think back to that moment in the arena. When the lights flickered. When the air turned cold. When, just for a second, it felt like we were somewhere else. And I wonder, what if that song wasn't just music? What if it was a door? Story 3. I don't scare easy. Been on the road with WWE for years. Stayed in plenty of shady motels and old hotels with creaky floors and flickering lights. Seen enough to know most of the weird stuff people talk about is just their mind playing tricks on them. But this wasn't a trick. It was a cold January night in Chicago, and we were booked in this old, historic hotel. The kind of place with dimly lit hallways, heavy wooden doors, and carpets that had soaked up decades of cigarette smoke and spilled whiskey. Some of the guys said wrestlers had been staying here for years. A few even swore it was haunted. I laughed it off at first, just road stories. Wrestlers love to talk. After a long day at the arena, I dragged myself up to my room on the 4th floor, dead on my feet. I remember fumbling with a key card, my hands still stiff from hauling equipment all night. The lock blinked green, and the door creaked open into the dark. The room smelled stale like old linens and something else, something I couldn't quite place. Maybe mildew, maybe something worse. I was too damn tired to care. I tossed my bag on the chair, locked the door, slid the chain across, and kicked off my boots. The air was heavy, like the room hadn't been opened in years, but the bed looked decent enough. I shut off the light, stretched out, and let the exhaustion pull me under. That's when I heard it. A whisper, soft at first, just a few words, too low to make out. It could have been the TV in the next room. Could have been the old pipes groaning in the walls. But it got louder, closer. It was coming from inside my room. I snapped up, heart hammering against my ribs. My mouth was dry. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, and the moment my fingers brushed it, the screen lit up. I hadn't touched the button, hadn't gotten a notification, just a bright, glowing screen cutting through the darkness, as if something had been waiting for me to wake up. My stomach knotted. The air felt thick, pressing down on me. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I'd rolled onto the charger cord and nudged it. Maybe it was nothing. Then the bathroom door creaked open. Slow, deliberate. My breath caught in my throat. The door had been closed when I came in. I was sure of it. I sat there, frozen, watching as the door eased open inch by inch, revealing the pitch-black bathroom beyond. The light switch was inside. I wasn't about to get up and reach into that darkness. I told myself it was just a draft. These old buildings have a way of shifting, settling. But then I heard it again. The whisper, not from the walls, not from the hallway, from the bathroom. I don't remember moving, but somehow I ended up on my feet, grabbing my bag and yanking the door open so hard it slammed against the wall. The hallway outside was empty. Too empty. The air didn't feel right, like I had just walked out of a sealed box. I spent the rest of the night in the hotel lobby, pretending to answer emails, pretending I wasn't shaken to my damn core. The next morning, I ran into one of the wrestlers in the elevator. Just small talk at first. Then, out of nowhere, I mentioned the weird night I had. He stopped mid-sentence. "Wait, what room were you in?" I told him. He went pale. "That's the same room Brody Lee once stayed in," he said quietly. "He always said it was haunted." I didn't ask for details. I didn't want to know. I checked out immediately. Story 4. I've worked security for WWE for years. Long enough to see things that don't make sense. You get used to the late nights, the empty arenas after the crowds have gone home, the feeling of walking alone down endless hallways where echoes bounce back at you like whispers. But there's one night I'll never forget. It was a small arena, the kind WWE uses for house shows, just outside of St. Louis. The kind of place that had seen better days. Cracked seats, dimly lit corridors, the faint scent of stale popcorn mixed with sweat. My shift was the usual: clear out the last of the crew, lock up, and make sure no fans are trying to sneak in for some kind of late night thrill. The arena was dead quiet, that kind of silence that feels thick, heavy, like the walls are pressing in on you. I was doing my rounds, walking along the upper level seats, when I glanced down at the ring. That's when I saw him. A man stood in the middle of the ring. Full wrestling gear, boots, tights, elbow pads. His stance was solid, hands on his hips, like he was waiting for the bell to ring. The overhead lights cast long shadows across the mat, making him look even taller. But here's the thing. There were no wrestlers left in the building. I knew that for a fact. I had personally seen the last of them leave an hour ago. The ring crew had packed up, and the place was supposed to be empty. I thought maybe it was some crew member messing around, maybe a rookie trying to get a feel for the ring when no one was watching. So I cupped my hand around my mouth and called out, "Hey, you're not supposed to be here." The figure didn't move. I took a step forward, my boots echoing against the concrete. "Hey buddy, you hear me?" Nothing. No shift in his stance. No reaction. Something was wrong. A cold, crawling feeling started to spread through my chest. I took another step toward the railing, leaning over for a better look. The guy was just standing there, staring straight ahead. And then I blinked. In that fraction of a second, he was gone. Not gone as in he walked away. Not gone as in he ducked out of sight. Just gone. One moment there. The next moment the ring was completely empty. But the ropes were still moving, swaying ever so slightly, as if someone had just been there, shifting their weight, adjusting their stance. I swear, I even heard the faint creak of the turnbuckle, like someone had just stepped off it. I felt my pulse hammering in my throat. My hands were slick with sweat. I wasn't some rookie scared of the dark. I'd seen fights, broken up brawls, dealt with rabid fans trying to jump the barricades. But this was something else. I needed proof. I jogged down the steps, my keys jingling at my hip, and made my way to the security office. The screens flickered in the dim light, showing empty hallways, darkened locker rooms, the silent parking lot. I rewound the footage for the last few minutes, my fingers drumming against the desk as I watched. At first, nothing. The ring sat empty, untouched. Then, one frame. One single, glitchy frame. A blurred, shadowy figure standing dead center in the ring. It was distorted, like the camera couldn't quite capture it properly. Its edges smudged as if it wasn't fully solid. But the shape was unmistakable. A wrestler. I hit pause, staring at the screen, my breath coming in short, shallow bursts. I rewound, played it again. The same thing. 1 second, empty ring. 1 frame, the figure. Next second, nothing. I backed away from the monitor, my skin crawling. The next day, I mentioned it to one of the older guys on the crew, a road agent who had been with WWE since the 80s. He went quiet, chewing the inside of his cheek like he was debating whether to say something. Finally, he exhaled through his nose and muttered, "You saw him too." I stared at him. "What do you mean, too?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "You're not the first. That place, some guys refuse to work late shifts there. Say they feel like they're being watched. A couple of them swore they saw someone in the ring when no one was supposed to be there." I swallowed hard. "Who do they think it is?" He hesitated. Then, in a quiet voice, he said, "Some say it's a wrestler who never made it. A guy who was supposed to debut back in the early 2000s but died before he got the chance. Car accident, I think. He was young, hungry, desperate to prove himself." I felt a chill run down my spine. The old guy continued, "They say, sometimes he still shows up, like he's waiting for his match, like he never got the message that his time was up." I didn't argue. I didn't say anything at all. I just finished my shift and got the hell out of there before the lights went out. And I've never looked at an empty WWE ring the same way again. Story 5. I don't care if you believe me. I don't need you to. But if you ever find yourself in a centuries-old hotel in the middle of nowhere, the kind with heavy wooden doors and a lingering smell of damp wallpaper, you might remember my story. It happened years ago, but I still see it when I close my eyes. That thing, standing there, watching. We were on tour in Europe, hopping from city to city, wrestling in packed arenas, and sleeping in whatever hotel WWE had booked for us that night. Usually, it was a chain, something predictable, something modern. But this time, the only place available was an old, historic hotel right on the edge of town. It was one of those places that felt grand once, but had long since faded. The kind where the halls stretched too long, the doors were too thick, and the floors groaned under your step like they were whispering something just out of earshot. I got my key, room 306, and dragged my bag upstairs. The moment I stepped in, I felt it, the weight of the room. I don't know how else to describe it. It was like walking into a space that wasn't entirely empty, like someone had just been there, and if I turned my head fast enough, I'd catch them slipping away. But I was exhausted. We'd wrestled 2 nights in a row, and my body felt like it had been through a car wreck. I told myself I was imagining things, that it was just jet lag, just the weird energy of an old building. I took a quick shower, lay down, and before I knew it, I was out. Then I woke up. No sound woke me, no nightmare. Just the kind of waking where your body senses something before your mind catches up. My mouth was dry. My heart was already hammering for no reason. And then I saw it. A figure, tall and unmoving, in the doorway of my room. It was cloaked in shadow, but I could see the outline, a hooded shape, standing perfectly still, watching me. My body locked up. Every instinct screamed at me to move, to do something, to shout, but I couldn't. It was like I'd been unplugged from myself. The only thing I could do was breathe, short, sharp breaths, like I was trying to stay quiet. The figure didn't move. It didn't breathe. I don't know how long I lay there, frozen, staring at it. 30 seconds, a minute, an hour. Time stretched in ways that didn't make sense. Finally, with every ounce of willpower I had, I reached for my phone. My fingers fumbled, shaking so hard I almost dropped it. I flicked on the flashlight. The second the beam hit the doorway, nothing. The figure was gone, but the door was still open. I don't remember falling asleep after that. I think my brain just shut down, like it couldn't process what had happened. When I woke up, it was morning, and sunlight was streaming through the curtains. For a second, I thought maybe it had been a dream. Then I looked at the door. I knew I had locked it before bed. The latch was still unbolted. At breakfast, I was quiet, pushing eggs around my plate, trying to convince myself I hadn't lost my mind. That's when one of the other guys sat down across from me, looking like hell. Man, I don't know if I was dreaming or what, but I swear to God I saw something in my room last night. My stomach turned to ice. "What did you see?" I asked. He hesitated, then whispered, tall, hooded, just standing there. A cold sweat broke out down my back. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to, because a second later, another guy at the table muttered, "Me too." We all sat there in silence. 3 grown men, wrestlers who had faced real fights, real injuries, real pain. But none of that compared to what we saw. We checked out early. No one wanted to stay another night. To this day, I don't know what it was. A ghost, a trick of the mind, something worse. But I'll tell you this. I don't sleep with my door open anymore.